The Cursed Forest of Dudleytown. The summer of 1906 was warm, bright, and full of promise as Dr. William Clark and his wife, Harriet, drove through the rolling countryside of northwestern Connecticut. The road twisted and turned, cutting through lush green hills, past meadows thick with wildflowers. Birds flitted through the trees, their songs carried by the soft summer breeze. It was idyllic, the kind of place that felt untouched by time. They had come here with a purpose, to find the perfect place for a second home. Dr. Clark was a respected oncologist, a man of science, who spent his days in the chaotic, bustling heart of New York City. His work was prestigious, demanding, and exhausting. The couple longed for a peaceful retreat, a place where they could escape the city's relentless noise and pressure. As they crested a small hill, a covered bridge loomed ahead, its deep red timbers weathered but strong. As they drove across, the world seemed to shift. When they emerged on the other side, their view opened up, and that's when they saw it. A dark, brooding forest, nestled between two mountains, unnaturally shaded, even in the height of summer. There was something strange about it, something that made the air feel colder despite the heat of the day. It was called Dark Entry Forest, and it was calling to them. The perfect land. A small, almost hidden access road led toward the forest. The couple exchanged excited glances. "Let's see where it leads," Harriet suggested. Dr. Clark turned onto the path. At first, the road was smooth, well kept, but the deeper they went, the rougher it became, overgrown, full of potholes, almost as if no one had used it for years. Eventually, they had to stop the car and continue on foot. As they stepped into the tree line, everything changed. The air grew still, the warmth of the sun disappearing instantly beneath the thick canopy. But instead of feeling threatened, they were enchanted. A wild apple orchard stretched out before them, its branches heavy with untouched, ripe fruit. A small herd of deer grazed peacefully, completely unafraid of their presence. The ground was carpeted with vibrant flowers, lilies, roses, and golden bitter pansies swaying without a breeze. Then there was the sparkling ground, as if tiny gemstones had been sprinkled across the forest floor. It was mica, a mineral that, when touched by sunlight, glistened like shattered glass. "This place is incredible," Harriet whispered, breathless with wonder. Dr. Clark nodded in agreement. "This is it," he said. They had found their perfect retreat. Within weeks, they bought 1,000 acres of land deep within Dark Entry Forest. But they didn't know the truth. They didn't know what had happened here, and they didn't know why no one else dared to live in this place. A town that vanished. Before Dr. Clark and Harriet had ever set foot in Dark Entry Forest, there had been another settlement there, a place called Dudleytown. Founded in the 1740s, it had started small, just a handful of settlers carving out a life in the dense Connecticut wilderness. But over the years, it grew. More families arrived, houses were built. At its peak, Dudleytown had around 30 families, a thriving, isolated community. And then everything went wrong. It started with the Carter family. In 1792, a devastating cholera epidemic swept through Dudleytown, wiping out 6 members of the Carter family in a matter of days. The survivors, stricken with grief, decided to flee. They abandoned their home and traveled back to New York City, hoping to escape the misfortune that had befallen them. But they never made it. Before they could reach the city, they were attacked and slaughtered by a group of native warriors. The only survivors were 3 children who were kidnapped and never seen again. The curse had begun. Not long after, a man named Hollister died under mysterious circumstances. Some said he had fallen from a rooftop. Others whispered that he had been pushed. Whatever the truth, his death marked the beginning of something even more terrifying. Because after Hollister's body was found, his neighbor Tanner started seeing them, the creatures in the trees. At first, they were just shadows, twisting, shifting figures lurking at the edge of the forest, watching. Then they came closer. Every night, Tanner saw them crawling just beyond the firelight, their unblinking eyes staring from the darkness. When he spoke of them, no one believed him. And then one day he lost his mind completely. His wife and daughter cared for him, but he never spoke a rational word again. Soon, his next-door neighbor, Abel, started seeing them too. By the early 1800s, more and more people began disappearing. Some went insane, some dropped dead without cause, some were simply never found. By 1900, Dudleytown was completely abandoned. The last remaining resident, John Brophy, watched his entire family die. His wife succumbed to cholera. His 2 sons were accused of theft in a nearby town and vanished while fleeing. One night, his house burned to the ground. As the flames devoured the last structure in Dudleytown, John Brophy was seen walking into the forest. He never returned. The town was gone, a ghost town left to rot and decay, and Dr. Clark had just moved on to its remains. Something in the forest. For years, the Clarks lived happily in their isolated paradise. Then, in 1918, everything changed. Dr. Clark was called back to New York for an emergency, leaving Harriet alone in the cabin for the first time. She begged him not to leave. "Please," she whispered, "don't leave me here alone." But he had no choice. He kissed her goodbye, promising to return within 2 days. He was gone for 36 hours. By the time he returned, his wife was gone. Not missing, not dead, but something else entirely. When he arrived back at the cabin, the front door was ajar. The owls in the trees were screaming, their hoots deafening, unnatural. He stepped inside. The house was silent. Then he heard it. Laughter. High-pitched, distorted, unnatural. It came from the upstairs bedroom. With shaking hands, Dr. Clark climbed the stairs. The laughter grew louder. He pushed open the door. Harriet was in the corner, curled into a tight ball, her mouth stretched into a ghastly grin. She wasn't moving, but the laughter was still coming from her. She locked eyes with him, and something else stared back. Dr. Clark ran from the house. Harriet never spoke a rational word again. She only repeated one sentence until the day she died. The creatures, they came back. Dark Entry Forest remains off limits to this day. Some say it's illegal to enter. Others say it's a warning. It was supposed to be the adventure of a lifetime. A journey into the raw, untouched wilderness of one of the most isolated places on Earth, the Torngat Mountains, where jagged peaks claw at the sky and icy fjords slice through the land like the veins of some ancient sleeping beast. But for 49-year-old Matt Dyer, this adventure would transform into a waking nightmare, one that would leave him battered, broken, and staring into the gaping maw of death itself. The arrival. On July 19, 2013, Matt boarded a tiny 19-seat Twin Otter airplane at Montreal International Airport in Canada. His destination was one of North America's most unforgiving landscapes, a place so remote that it was closer to the Arctic Circle than to civilization. The journey would take him and 7 other adventure seekers into a place few dared to tread, a place ruled not by men, but by monsters of the wild. Matt wasn't a wealthy man. A small-town lawyer from Maine, he dedicated his life to providing free or low-cost legal assistance to the state's poorest residents. But he was also an avid outdoorsman, lured by the promise of true, unspoiled wilderness. When he first saw the ad for a 2-week expedition into the Torngats in a Sierra Club magazine, the hefty $6,000 price tag barely gave him pause. This was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to witness nature at its most primal. 2.5 hours later, the Twin Otter descended over a narrow gravel airstrip surrounded by dense forest on one side and an endless river on the other. The group gathered their gear and shuffled toward a cluster of flimsy plywood structures, their temporary base camp. The real journey, however, lay even deeper within the mountains, accessible only by float plane. For 2 days, the adventurers reviewed emergency procedures, hiking routes, and the harsh realities of surviving in the Torngats. And then, finally, they were ready. The float plane roared to life, lifting them off the water and soaring toward the unknown. As they broke through the thick clouds, the Torngat Mountains revealed themselves for the first time. It was a place that looked utterly alien, a world sculpted not by time, but by the violence of glaciers that had carved their way through the earth over millennia. Towering, jagged peaks loomed over glassy fjords, their blue-green depths so clear that Matt could see fish moving just beneath the surface. It was breathtaking and foreboding. But beneath the beauty lurked something far more sinister. The campsite on the edge of a death zone. After a 45-minute flight, the float plane touched down on a small water inlet. Matt and the others disembarked, their boots sinking into the damp earth as they watched their only link to the outside world disappear into the sky. Their campsite was perched on a wide open plain, just a few hundred feet from the water's edge. Unlike the previous base camp, there was no forest for cover, just vast, barren land stretching to the towering peaks beyond. This was pure, untamed wilderness. Rich Gross and Marta Chase, the two Sierra Club trip leaders, directed the group to set up their tents. Once they had finished, they encircled the site with a small electric fence meant to deter curious wildlife. It was a feeble barrier against the true rulers of this land. That first evening, as they took their group photo,